Hello and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast. I am your host, Fabrice Nye, and joining me here in the Murrieta studios is Dr. David Burns. Hi, David.
Hi, Fabrice.
Dr. David Burns has been a pioneer in the development of cognitive therapy, and he is the creator of the new team therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 20 languages. He is an emeritus adjunct clinical professor of psychiatry at the Stanford University School of Medicine. Welcome to episode 71 of the Feeling Good podcast. And David, we've gotten some comments on our 5 Secrets series, and we'll address a couple of those today. In fact, if you don't mind, I'd like to read a little bit of a praise to start with. We got something from Rose who said about the 5 Secrets. This is very insightful. I have a teammate who's a complainer. I will try this disarming technique. You are so generous to share this gem with us.
Yeah, and Rose, if you can get back to us after you try it,
it'd be great.
We'd love it to hear what you have to say.
So here's a question from Johnny. He says, "Hi, David. I'm really enjoying the series on the 5 Secrets of Effective Communication. I had a query about disarming. It seems to me that it could be easy to fall into the trap of the unexpressed emotion model." I imagine he might be talking about the hidden emotion.
Yeah.
When using disarming, I could imagine myself agreeing with what I find valid in the other person's point of view and avoiding expressing my own anger, sadness, etc. I noticed in your example you did express your anger with the borderline personality disorder client, and it sounded like it didn't undermine the disarming. But I would really like to hear more of your thoughts on this. How do we use disarming and avoid unexpressed emotion? It seems to me that if I lead with, "I feel angry and upset," this might undermine the disarming technique. But this might be my lack of skill in expressing anger and sadness.
Well, I'm sure you can comment on this one too. It's such a great question, but I emphasize the importance of using all the 5 secrets, not necessarily with every single response.
Yeah.
But that you would want to include "I feel" statements when you're using the disarming technique or thought and feeling empathy. Otherwise, you'll sound mechanical or phony or manipulative. Absolutely sharing your own feelings is a part of it. In fact, I think of it as EAR, empathy, assertiveness, respect. Empathy is hearing what the other person has to say, acknowledging their thoughts, their feelings, finding truth in what they're saying. Assertiveness is sharing your own feelings with "I feel" statements in a diplomatic and respectful way, and then the stroking is conveying, warmth and respect even in the heat of battle. A helpful thing that a colleague mentioned to me once when we were jogging on the weekend around Haverford College in Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. It was just a simplistic little thing, but I'd never heard it. It was that you can share angry feelings or you can attack with angry feelings.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing. Are you going to share the way you feel in a respectful, vulnerable way, or are you going to, act them out by attacking the other person? And if you, act out your angry feelings with sarcasm, defensive-ness, arguing, put downs, it will escalate.
Yeah.
But if you share your feelings while using stroking and disarming and empathy, then it can make your communication far more human and deep and real.
Yeah. What I tell my clients is there's a difference between expressing and acting out.
Yeah.
And the former is conducive to communication and the latter not so much. What I do myself when I express feelings like what Johnny is talking about, like feeling angry and upset, is I do it by saying that, I kind of not even happy that I'm feeling this way, but this is the way I'm feeling now. So it's both an acknowledgement that this is what's happening in this moment, and a recognition that I wish it were different.
I'll tell you another cool thing that your comment just inspired in me is that when I'm working with clients and I'm getting angry with the patient, I've sometimes asked permission of the patient if I can share how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
I might say, I've been having some fairly strong feelings that I would like to share with you, including some negative feelings. But I want to be very clear that my goal is not to get rid of you or for you to drop out of therapy or to hurt you or to punish you, but to bring our relationship closer and to invite you to share some of your feelings as well. Would that be okay with you?
Yeah.
Or would you prefer it if I don't let you know what my feelings are?
Yeah.
And that can be a really nice way to...
Because it puts them in the driver's seat.
Yeah, and shows respect.
Yeah, absolutely. There's more in Johnny's email.
Oh, okay.
He had another question. He says, the other question I have is more intellectual. It seems that some aspects of the 5 secrets you came up with yourself, you said from observing your students who were naturally good at this. However, did you draw on any theorists to help develop any of the secrets? For example, you mentioned Martin Buber, I-thou relationship quite a bit.
Yes, I drew on just that person, Martin Buber, even though I've never read any of his stuff. Just hearing that he distinguished between an I-it relationship and an I-thou relationship was huge, and that's an important concept behind the 5 secrets, that when you're in conflict with someone, you can view that person as a bad entity. We see this in politics.
Oh, yeah.
We say, they're bad people, or he's a loser, or that type of thing, where you think someone is an object, a bad object, and then you think you can compete with them or try to punish them or hurt them or in some cases even kill them because you're so taken by your distorted thinking, labeling, all or nothing thinking, other directed blame. That's an I-it relationship. Yeah. Or you can view the other person with warmth and respect, even in the heat of battle, and this can be very powerful. Now, people write in about, can I use these in a situation of abuse? Did we talk about Dietrich Bonhoeffer in a previous?
I do not recall.
Well, my father was a Lutheran minister, and he was a Lutheran minister in Germany during the Second World War, and he refused to endorse the Nazis, and because he was quite an important person in Germany with a lot of followers of his own, the Nazis imprisoned him and threatened him with death if he would not endorse the Nazi cause. He never did endorse the Nazi cause. They took him out several times in front of a firing squad, said, if you don't endorse it, then we're going to shoot you.
Yeah.
But they were afraid for a period of time to assassinate him, to make him a martyr.
Yeah.
But he treated all of his prison guards with respect, with an I-thou relationship.
Yeah.
And when they put him in shackles, he would say things like, thank you. And then they would get angry and say, why are you thanking us for putting these shackles on your feet? And he says, well, because I don't agree with what you're doing. I don't agree with your thinking, but I know you believe in what you're doing. And from your point of view, you're doing a good job. Mm-hmm. And I respect that. I respect you as a human being, even though I don't go along with the Nazi thinking.
Yeah.
And he, surprisingly, this kind of won the hearts of these sadistic, power-hungry, mean German guards, and they started smuggling in paper to him and pens so he could write, and they would smuggle his notes out.
Yeah.
And this was eventually published as a series of books, Letters and Papers from Prison, and also the book Prisoner for God. And so he really formed that warm connection. Sadly, they eventually did assassinate him, and he was killed by the Nazis in World War II. But he manifested that I-thou I-thou relationship.
Yeah.
That's the only one I think that has inspired me. Most of the 5 Secrets, as well as the rest of what I've done, has.
You mentioned Carl Rogers.
Oh, Carl Rogers,
you can't
absolutely
get around that.
Yeah, absolutely. He's the thought and feeling empathy guy for sure. So but I've never read him either. I've never read much in my whole life, to tell you the truth. I don't read. I'm a very, very slow reader. I've only read 1 or 2 books in my whole life, to be honest. And I learn from my patients, and I learn from my teaching. Sometimes I learn here on our Feeling Good podcast. I learn empirically more than studying great thinkers.
Yeah. Okay, so we have another question here from Pilar. And she says, if I am unfairly attacked in public by a narcissistic boss.
What's her name here?
Pilar.
Pilar?
Yes. Mm-hmm. If I'm unfairly attacked in public by a narcissistic boss, should I use the disarming technique? Doesn't that make me look meek? And does the disarming technique work in a public forum? Or is it best reserved for one-on-one situations?
Yeah. Well, again, the devil would be in the details. If you could say, what did your boss say and what did you say next, we could make a much more intelligent response. But narcissistic bosses are generally the easiest of all to control and manipulate. Uh-huh. And sometimes it is appropriate to use the 5 Secrets in a manipulative manner. As the Buddha said so often, it's incorrect to try to be genuine all the time. And you've probably read that. It's actually the first sentence of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. I'm just bullshitting here, as I so often do. But sometimes the goal is not to get close to someone. People who are narcissistic and mean and power hungry and positions of power are intimidating. And sometimes if you combine the disarming technique with stroking, that they really kind of melt in your hand. And if you do this skillfully, I think you'll end up ahead of the game, and you can do that whether you're meeting with them one-on-one or in a public situation. But once again, it depends on the manner in which you do it. It's kind of like the question, should you play music at a party or something? And the question would be, it depends on how well you play the piano. And if you can play it really, really beautifully, people will enjoy what you're doing. Generally, people, when you have a narcissistic, hostile boss, people can see that about the person. And then if you respond with skillful disarming and stroking, the boss will 9 times out of 10 calm right down and become much more personable, and the people will see that you did something skillful.
Well, let's see if we can take a hypothetical example where in a meeting the boss will have criticized this person, saying, well, you always turn in your assignments late, and factually it's not really even true. How would she respond to that?
Okay, well, see if you can do an example of this, and then I'll comment on it and give you my own spin on it. How would you respond with the 5 Secrets using stroking and disarming?
Well, I would say I'd be comfortable doing that one-on-one with the boss. I would be.
Should we talk about how to do it one-on-one then, or what you would say in a public?
I think that the public forum is where the.
So how would you respond in a public forum?
So in a public forum, I would be mindful of the rest of my audience, and I would say, well, I might say, well, I see how you might be seeing it this way. I wonder if we could take this conversation offline and we can have a meeting about this.
That sounds good, but I would add some stroking and some disarming to it.
Okay, yeah.
And I might say something along the lines of, you bring an awful lot to our team, and we're lucky to have you. And one of the things you do is you kind of crank that whip and get us moving forward, because it's important to keep these projects on task.
Yeah.
So I look forward to sitting down with you and see where your concerns are and see what we can do to make it right for you.
Right. So it's interesting because your stroking was had some disarming in it, but it was mostly stroking.
Yeah.
So, but you do redirect to having a one-on-one conversation.
Yeah, and when someone is narcissistic, I mean, stroking is going to be the key. I mean, why do these narcissistic people get so crabby? It's because they're not getting enough stroking.
Yeah,
and they kind of invite hostility.
Yeah.
And then if you don't accept that invitation, you respond with warmth and admiration. Mm-hmm. Generally, they'll respond very, very well. And again, what I would say, this is intentionally manipulative. This is an application of the 5 secrets where you're trying to get a particular response. You're not trying to develop greater true intimacy with this person,
which might not be very possible anyhow.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay.
Was that an adequate answer?
I think so, yeah. Okay. I think so. I have another question here, which is not directly related to the 5 secrets, but we have a few Ask Davids to catch up on. So why don't I
great.
Tell you about this. This is from Harry, and he says, I recently discovered your site and podcast, and there's a lot of things I'd like to ask you. I have a simple question. I listened with interest to the podcast episode 60 on self-monitoring. There was mentioned the technique of using a counter clicker each time unwanted thoughts or feelings appeared. You mentioned the symptoms would decrease in 4 weeks, but also that it rarely, and he's putting that in quote, rarely actually helped anyone. Could you explain why?
Oh, yeah, this is great. And I think this person, Harry, might have then sent me another email. He's actually doing research, maybe in Scandinavia. I might not have this right, on self-monitoring. Mm. And again, this is big in meditation as well, the idea of getting into the present moment, rather, when your mind gets distracted to something negative, you get back into the present moment. There's a lot of wisdom in it, and for some people it's helpful. But I found it occasionally helpful in my practice. Maybe two or three times in my career, I found this wrist clicker to be actually helpful to people. Most of the time, they would be counting their negative thoughts every day, and after doing this for 3 or 4 weeks, there was no change. It was just a kind of a inadequate, not a very good technique. And the reason why it might work sometimes and not others is that you may still believe the negative thought. And we'll come to these questions later, but a lot of readers have been saying, what do I do if I have the thought that I'm worthless, or everybody else is better at this than I am, or all these self-critical thoughts. For those kind of thoughts, you see, you could count the thought, I'm no good, I'm a loser, all day, every day, for 3 or 4 weeks, and you might have that thought 10 times a day or 140 times a day.
Yeah.
But if you still believe it, just counting it isn't going to make it go away. You would need other more sophisticated techniques. Unfortunately, we have tons of them: positive reframing, paradoxical agenda setting, externalization of voices, acceptance paradox, examine the evidence, downward arrow technique, experimental technique, on and on and on, with many methods to crush those kind of thoughts. And the self-monitoring is probably not going to be one of the ones that helps. Also, the double standard technique is a great technique to crush those thoughts that rob you of self-esteem. Now, if you have a habit or an addiction, it might work better. And we'll do a weight loss or addiction podcast here very shortly. But let's say that you're being tempted by some urge to go get a donut or something, and you're really committed to a diet. Well, there you could kind of track that thought and then let go of it, get into the here and now, and see how many of these tempting thoughts you have each day, and record those over a period of several weeks. That could be helpful, because if you ignore a tempting thought, and get into the here and now, well then 10 or 15 minutes later, that hunger urge will kind of naturally disappear. So in those kinds of applications, self-monitoring would be, that's counting your thoughts on a wrist clicker, could conceivably be helpful. You may have some thoughts on this too.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking this is really in specific cases, but the main thing to remember is that when we have disturbing thoughts, it all revolves around how much we believe them.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
If you have a thought, even 1,000 thoughts that you don't believe, then they don't have any power over you.
Like there's a plane about to come crashing through the window there, Fabrice.
Yeah, and I'm feeling nothing about it because I don't believe you.
Exactly.
You could repeat it 20 times, it wouldn't make any difference.
Exactly.
But the moment I start believing it, I would feel, anxiety and panic.
Right, and so for some of the thoughts that cause anxiety, panic, depression, or anger, we really believe those thoughts, and just some mechanical technique is not going to be very helpful to a person. We have to work at a deeper level to reveal to the person why that negative thought is not true, or how to let go of that negative thought.
So here's another one here from JP. I was wondering if you have any books you can recommend on working with children. Especially, I appreciate your idea of testing, both to know if the intervention works and to improve my skills as a therapist. Do you have any tests that can work with young children?
Well, that's great. What's this person's first name?
JP. JP.
J initials?
Yeah, initial J, initial P.
JP, okay, test with children. Yes, I'll address the testing with children and more briefly treatment with children, but the tests, I believe it's crucial.
And books.
Yeah, okay, and books, yeah. I believe it's crucial to test all of our patients at the start and end of every single therapy session. Right. And the tests I've developed for adults, like the depression test, the suicidal urges, anxiety, anger, things like that, I create all of my tests at about the 5th grade level using the grammar checker, the reading level checker in Microsoft Word. And so those tests I've administered to teenagers down to age 13 or 14, and they have the same outstanding psychometric properties as in adults. You can use my adult tests with 15-year-olds, 14-year-olds, and sometimes even with 13-year-olds. Yeah. In the update to the Therapist Toolkit, I also have new tests for children age 5 to 13, which get at the same constructs of empathy and depression, but they're brief tests with simple words. Like instead of calling it therapeutic empathy, we call it therapist niceness, for example. And it's the depression test is just 2 items rather than 5 items. And you can also read those tests quickly because they're very short if you're working with children, and they can kind of tell you what their answers are if they're too young, if their reading level is even below the level of these tests.
And people can contact you to buy the toolkit, right?
Oh, yeah. The order form is on my website, www.feelinggood.com. And there's orders there for the Therapist Toolkit as well as the ebook and the Easy Diagnostic System. Now, you asked for how you do therapy with children. Are there books for children? I'm sure there are books on cognitive therapy for children. Unfortunately, I don't have the names at my fingertips, but I can tell you when I first learned about cognitive therapy, there was someone gave me a little cognitive therapy cartoon book. This is way back in the 1970s that kind of showed cognitive distortions with cartoon figures, and I thought it was tremendous. And I suspect there's a ton of this kind of stuff out there. You might have to Google to get access, find out what these books are. And this might be a good time to tap our listenership. And some people might have those resources. So if you do, send that to us, and we'll post it for JP. Yeah, great. Thank you. So here's one last one here. This is from Tom, who says that
I know from personal experience that your methods work, but sometimes I worry about young people, especially my cousins, who may be getting bullied on social media and who perhaps don't know how to cope with it. Probably the cases of suicides reported in the news are only the tip of the iceberg. I hardly use social media myself, so I don't know how they work, but I imagine it would be difficult for a young person to opt out, as I have done.
Difficult for the person to opt what?
To opt out for a young person,
To opt out?
Opt out of using social media.
I see, yeah.
To not use social media.
Oh, yeah, right.
He writes, I remember reading that Joanna Lumley once said that if she had a Facebook account, she would elect to have no friends. Also that an intelligent young priest told me it would be best for a priest at least to not have a Facebook account. Do you have any advice concerning social media?
Well, yeah, great. Thank you. I don't have so much advice about social media. I would say I myself occasionally get bullied on social media, and I talked about that on one of my Sunday Facebook Live Q&A broadcasts a couple weeks ago. Someone wrote
every Sunday at 3 p.m. Pacific.
Yeah, that's right, and that's growing too. We're up to, like, this last Sunday's podcast has been out just for a few days. They were up to 800 views of that already,
yeah.
And so that's growing, just like our Feeling Good podcasts are. That's a broadcast, not a podcast, and it's live, but you can watch it afterwards.
Yeah, you can watch the recording.
But I would say there's two powerful tools for dealing with bullying that we could offer. One is the inner solution, and the other is the outer solution. The inner solution is that external events can't upset you. It's only your thoughts can upset you. And so if somebody's bullying you or criticizing you or putting you down, it will only affect you emotionally if you're buying into what they're saying and telling yourself, and this does happen, yes, I am a loser and I don't have enough friends and I am worthless and my life will never amount to anything. And that's a great general cognitive therapy theme for a daily mood log. What was the event? And then you circle your feelings and how strong were those between 0 and 100, and then what are your negative thoughts? Then you can identify the distortions in those thoughts and talk back to them. This is actually a theme that often comes up on Sunday hikes, believe it or not, even working with adults as recently as this last Sunday. We had a hiker, a very sophisticated, tremendous person, but his house was broken into by, I guess, some kids with a baseball bat. Smashed his front door, went into his house, smashed his television, stole things. The neighbor heard the pounding, went in, chased them, and they ran off. And whether the police will catch them or not, I don't know. But then he got bullied. They sent out a neighborhood watch, and most people were very supportive of him, as you can imagine. But one person actually kind of bullied him and said, like, "Oh, this is your fault that this happened to you. This must be somebody who had a grudge against you," and just kind of putting him down in a cruel way. And so we worked both on the internal solution to change the way he was thinking, his self-critical thoughts, using cognitive therapy techniques as well as team positive reframing techniques, and then also the external solution. We did something kind of called feared fantasy, where we acted the imaginary role of this hostile person, putting him down, and how would he respond, and modeled ways to just kind of completely turn it around, using the familiar techniques, disarming and stroking and inquiry and things like that. So I think we do have two powerful tools for helping people who feel bullied, and if we got some more information and data on that, conceivably that could be the topic of a future recording. My last comment about that, for better or worse, is I think mental health professionals tend to have an overly idealistic view of human nature, and I'm more conservative from this point of view. if you've read my book, Feeling Good Together, this is very clear that I think humans have a basic loving drive and a basic sadistic hostile drive. And I think this bullying it comes straight from the sadism in human nature. Right. And I feel an incredible rage about it, to be honest. It makes me want to bully the people who are bullying the kids, but fortunately we have some potentially tremendous tools to help a person respond skillfully and effectively and to triumph over that problem. But it requires training and therapists who know these techniques to make that available for kids. And the sad thing is just so many people don't have access to effective therapy or effective help. In fact, that's one of our motives in doing these Feeling Good podcasts and having my website and having the Sunday Facebook broadcasts is to give something to people for free, giving the best of what you and I have to offer.
Yeah, well, that's the idea. Well, we're using social media to the best of our ability.
Well, that's a good point, too.
So, this being said, this concludes our podcast. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Fabrice, and thank you, all of you, for the great questions. I have a ton more great questions, so we'll have more of these Ask Davids coming up before too long.
This has been another episode of the Feeling Good podcast. For more information, visit Dr. Burns' website at feelinggood.com, where you will find the show notes for this podcast under the blog page, and where you can leave your comments and questions. The website has an abundance of resources for therapists as well as non-therapists, including books, workshops, a list of online training groups around the world, and much more. Theme music is Gypsy Jazz in Paris, 1935, composed and performed by Brett Van Donsel. I am your host, Fabrice Nye, and I invite you to join us next time for another episode of the Feeling Good podcast.